The following program has been paid for by the friends and partners of Bruce Downs, the Catholic Guy.
Wherever you are around the world today, it's great you can be here with us. Today, I want to talk on a subject that Jesus exemplified for us and that will help us live happier, more powerful and greater lives. I want to talk on the whole idea of being a servant. Now, I know when I say the word servant, some of us go, oh, really? But if you understand this concept in the scriptures, it's an amazing subject that boosts us completely and utterly to another level. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I think this will bless you. So go get your family, get your friends, get everybody you love, sit back, relax, enjoy yourself. I pray today blesses you. Many years ago, a Catholic priest used to ask me all the time how my personal prayer was going, and I didn't know how to answer. Well, he taught me how to pray, and my life has never been the same. It's the most important thing I do in my life. So I wrote a book called Personal Prayer for the Everyday Person that step by step helps us to pray. Have you ever noticed that so often our prayers can be just asking for things from God? And any relationship that's all about just asking for stuff is not really a very fulfilling and meaningful relationship, is it? Or have you ever noticed that so often when it comes to prayer, we just don't know what to say? Well, I'm a husband and a father of 5 children, and I wrote this book, Personal Prayer for the Everyday Person, for women and men like me who are busy and yet want to connect with God in some way. I would love to bless you and give you this book for no charge, for no cost. Prayer changed my life. I would not be here today if it was not for personal prayer. Write to me on this address or call me on this number and I'll send you personal prayer for the everyday person for no charge at all. And I pray it blesses you.
We want you to have Bruce's book, Personal Prayer, for free. Call us on the number on your screen or write to us at P.O. Box 97367, Washington, D.C. 20090-7367, and we'll send you a copy of Personal Prayer. Want to see the full episode online? Go to brucedownsthecatholicguy.com.
We exist, our mission statement says, we haven't talked about it for a long time, we exist to bring disconnected people into an ever-deepening relationship with Jesus. Yeah. So they come, and the way we're going to do that is through building communities that people love to attend. And love to attend. Love to attend means I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss. One of our core values says that, and a core value is something we hold to be true, is that we value servant living. And I want to talk about servanthood today. I want to talk about what it is to be a servant. And I've talked on this on a few occasions, and I've talked on this passage of scripture, and you might have heard me talk on it before, but this has really taken on a new understanding for me as I've come into this understanding of what it means to abide in God. That if you abide in me and my words abide in you, you can ask anything of the Father and it will be given to you. And I want to tell you right at the very beginning what I hope what I'm going to trying to achieve from today's message. I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to read it to you because I wrote out my mission statement for the message. And I thought, let's have a mission statement for the message. And it's this. My desire at the end of today is that the Catholic Guy Impact Church community would consist of people who love the deserving and the undeserving, the acceptable in society and the unacceptable, the wealthy and the poor, those who are close to God and those who are far from God. And how? By pouring out their life in emotional, material, and practical ways. Not just in prayer, but in emotional, material, and practical ways. So I want to talk about what it is to serve and to be a servant, and how we might build a bedrock underneath us. If you have your Bible, turn with me to John 13. John 13, or it's on the screen, John 13, chapter 3, and it says this. In John 13, chapter 3, we're going to read to 17. And it says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he'd come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe and tied a towel around himself. And then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. And he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus answered, "You do not know what I'm doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you shall have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was the one who would betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he'd washed their feet and put on his robe and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I've done for you, or done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for that is what I am. So if I am your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, and you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Very truly, I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are their masters greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." Father, just unveil this to us right now. I want you to imagine the scene. There are these people, men who've been with Jesus for 3 years. They've been present for all the miracles, all the big things. They'd been there to see the spectacular stuff. He had taken them away. He'd spent time forming them, leading them, teaching them, allowing them to watch him. They'd heard his great sermons, the sermons that had transformed people, and thousands had given their lives to God afterwards. And yet here we are celebrating one of the great feasts. This feast is called the Passover, one of the great religious days that Jesus, which became known as the Last Supper. Jesus is with them. This is when they're celebrating the people leaving Egypt after 430 years, after 10 plagues. And here they are, and none of them have thought to wash each other's feet. Now, thank goodness, feet washing in our society is not something that we have to do, right? It was done for comfort. It was done for cleanliness. More than likely, many of them would have been sitting on the ground, and so your feet would have been close to you. We all see those lovely medieval pictures, as I've talked about in the past, of them sitting at beautiful tables. But the truth is, scholars tell us wood was not something there was a lot of in those days. And many of them ate their meals and everything on the ground. So maybe they were on the ground. Maybe. And so it was regarded as great hospitality. It was regarded as being considerate of your guests to wash their feet when they arrived. It was seen as just as important as feeding a hungry person who came to visit you, or giving them a place of rest if you washed their feet. To not do so was seen to be discourteous, was seen to even be insulting if you didn't do it. And so here they are, the 12 apostles and Jesus, and it seems to be a venue that none of them owned, that they had hired. And so maybe that's the reason it wasn't done by someone. Like if they came to your house, you'd go, I've got to wash their feet. And you just have the stuff and the gear and the towels and the bowls and the water all set up. But maybe because they had hired a place, maybe it wasn't there. Just surmising, I don't know why. And I can imagine thinking to himself, have they been with me for 3 years and they haven't listened? Have they watched me for 3 years and they didn't notice who I am, what I am? Have they become so familiar with me? I was listening to a pastor of a very, very big Christian church. I was talking about it only to someone this morning. And he was saying to me, he said, when I go to a church, he said, when I go to places to speak, he said, I've got security around me. He said, I have drivers. He said, I'm protected. He said, the crowds come. But he said, when I go to my church to speak, my local community, they just go, oh, it's just him. I wonder if they had become a little familiar with the spectacular. Because we all do become familiar with the spectacular, don't we? I look at what God has done through what we've been doing through the television program, we as a ministry. And in a sense, what was once amazing now has become, in some sense, ordinary. It's just become ordinary. You know, every week we now are paying somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 just for people to answer the phones from the number of calls we're receiving to the television program every week. That's just once a week, 6,000 to 8,000 a week. That doesn't account for the people who are opening the mail, which is thousands more. In just 6 months, that's what you've done. In just 6 months, you know. And it can be, but you can kind of go, oh, well. You can become flippant with the magnificent, can't you? With the magnificent. So here they are, and no one's got up, and no one's saying, look at what, no one's saying, this is what I should do. And, you know, foot washing was a practice that had gone on for all of their lives. It wasn't like it was something that was just brand new, that they'd just been introduced to. And you can imagine Jesus thinking to himself, are they so selfish? Are they so self-centered? Are they so self-absorbed? Are they so worried about what the world says about people who wash feet that they would be seen to be one of those people? Maybe they were thinking, if I wash the other apostles' feet, I'll somehow be below them. Maybe they were thinking, I'll lose my place at the table because I'm this close to Jesus, but if I do that, maybe everyone will push up and I'll end up down the back. Who knows what they were thinking? You know, Jesus would have had a right to be exasperated. Jesus would have had a right to be disappointed, to maybe even feel, I've failed. You ever worked at something for a long time and you try to get a group of people to understand something? Many of you have led all sorts of things, and at the end of it, people don't do stuff that were meant to do, and you kind of go, it's all my fault, I'm the leader. It happens in all sorts of jobs, managers, owners of businesses, etc. So Jesus decides, well, if no one else is going to do it because it's important, I'm going to do it. So what he does is he gets dressed for service, because there's always a dress for service, isn't there? He takes off his outer garment, he grabs a towel, he puts it over his arm, and he tucks the towel around his waist, he fills a bowl with water, and then he walks up to do it. And imagine what the apostles would have been thinking. They probably thought, so you can't do this, not you. And then they probably went, oh, now I remember who you are. You know, you were just that guy we'd become familiar with. Probably guilt immediately washed over them. And some might have even thought, if only I'd thought about it, maybe Jesus would be looking at me going, well done, good and faithful servant. Maybe. But that was really about them, wasn't it? But no, while they were so occupied with themselves, the common hospitality had left the building, and they'd forgotten. I wonder if someone would have said, you know, you're Jesus, you shouldn't be doing that, you're the leader. And we know what we want our leaders to be, because our leaders are reflections of us, aren't they? And Peter looks up disturbed, and he says to Jesus, when Jesus gets to him and says, are you going to do me? And Jesus says, yes, I am. And he says, well, no. Peter says, no way. And then Jesus says, you don't know what I'm doing, Pete. You don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what I'm doing. Unless you let me do this, you'll never enter into heaven. You'll never enter into all that God has for you. Yeah. Right? And Jesus says to Peter, if you want to share in this, I have to do this. And so Peter says, well, do all of me. And Jesus says, Pete, you just don't get it, do you? That's why I love Peter the most. I am Peter. I'm either too excessive, too under, too wrong most of the time. I am Peter. And Jesus is making a statement about the new order. Jesus is making a statement about what their church will be, what the kingdom of God will be. And the statement is, do the menial tasks that a servant will do. Get dressed for service. Get dressed. If you want to be like me, position doesn't count. Only your heart counts. That's the only thing that matters. Jesus was saying, serving each other, laying down your whole life for each other, that's the new order. But we know that, don't we? And yet that's so difficult for us as Christians today. We know it. It's so difficult for us today because it seems so countercultural to our world, which is so much about self. Today we don't wash each other's feet, praise the Lord. We don't. But we might carry each other's bags. We might greet each other with intention. We might stand when someone comes into a room to honour them. We might get a person a drink. We might think about how we allocate our money. We might how we spend our time, how we encourage with intention, who we speak to, how we show respect. They're the ways we wash each other's feet today. And as much as it was meant to be a habit that every Christian did all of the time, it's meant to be a way that we live all of the time. Jesus was saying you need to do this to be the kind of person that I can use and I can mature. Jesus was saying it's not all about you. Jesus was saying. In Mark 10:45 it says, "For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus calls us to a term that's not common today in the 21st century. Jesus calls us to this idea and this concept called servanthood. That every person, every one of us is called to be a servant in some way or another. And servanthood means putting others first. Servanthood means seeing the Jesus in another person that we do not know. When Rosemary and I made the decision to leave Perth, we sat our children down, 4 of them were there, and we said to them, we're leaving because we believe that there are people that God is calling us to serve that we've never met, that they would know Jesus one day. And whilst we love you, we must leave you in order to be the people that God has called us to be. And so you'll raise your kids and our grandchildren we won't see except on holidays because we've been called to be servants. And so we must make those hard decisions that will break our heart when we pause to think about it. Servanthood requires denying ourselves. It requires us to become like Jesus. It requires us to say to others, you go first, you have my turn, and maybe I'll miss out altogether. The world says don't do it that way. The world says to us, what about your rights? The world says to us, what about equality? The world says to us, have more, and the more you have, the better you are, the more successful you are, and the more the world will celebrate you for what you've achieved. The self-serving culture that we live in is countercultural to the kingdom. It says indulge yourself. It says fulfill your desires. It says satiate your pleasures. It says pursue pleasure. The world is saying to us today, it's all about you. It's all about you. And in churches, what's it look like in church? What does that worldliness look like in a church or in a community? It's not caring about that people would ever know Christ. It's walking into churches and seeing no one's heart break that there are people who don't know the person of Jesus. It is serving only when it suits us. It is complaining when the sermon doesn't touch us but touches someone else but didn't touch us. It's not being prepared to put the church before other things, to put God before other things, even our family. It is not being prepared, it's not being prepared to engage with people who need us, who limit our time because we say, well, I've got to be balanced. I've got to find balance in my life. It's making excuses for not serving. It's, I have children, I have assignments, I have no time, I'm busy. Christians become conditioned because of the world we live in. Christians become conditioned because the world is like that. It's look after me, it's care for me, it's be reasonable, don't be excessive. And if we look at Jesus, what did Jesus do? We read in Philippians 2, verse 1 to 11, we read about Jesus, who was God, denied himself and became human for us. The ultimate act of servanthood. Jesus' whole purpose for coming into this world was for our benefit. Everyone else was first. Everyone else was first. The Father's will was first. It says in Luke 22, verse 24, a dispute arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. But he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you, not so with you. Rather, the greatest of you must become like the youngest, and the leader like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? It's not the one at the table, Jesus says, but I'm among you as one who serves. Can I ask you this morning, are you a servant? I mean, you're doing your job. Some of you are mothers and your fathers, but that's your job. Some of you are friends, but that's your job. But are you servants? Are you servants? Everyone is called to service. Everyone has a purpose in the body. No one in this church community is here accidentally. You may not know at this point in time why you're here. You may not know what your gift is. You may not know what your place in the body is. And for some, that's very obvious. And for others of that, it's more obtuse and obscure and has to be discovered and it's got to be searched for. But everyone has a purpose in the body. No one has all the gifts. No one has all the gifts. And God determines which gift you get. God determines which one you get. It says in Corinthians, it says, now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. And many. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honoured, every part rejoices with it. So the body's constructed in a certain way. It says in 1 Corinthians 12, it says, now you are the body of Christ and each one of you is part of it. So we're all part of this body. So what does it mean for us in this church family at this point in time in our history? Because if you look at where we're going right now, we are setting up in order more powerfully to reach our local church community, our local community, to the people who live in this part of the world, to people who will visit, people who will come and get that we can touch, people that we can hug, people that we can see. We know that we'll continue to do the stuff through the media, and that will go beyond, and hopefully those communities will all be stopping and going, what can we do to touch the people that are there? In Mark it says, he called the crowd with his disciples and he said to them, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake, for the sake of the gospel, will save it. What I'm here today to ask you is, will some of you lose your life? Will some of you radically change your employment? Will some of you change your living situations? Will some of you change the things that you spend your time on in order to serve this community as we go forward? Not just for us, yes, for us, but for others as well. I want to put a challenge to you. I want to put a challenge to you, just like the challenge was put to me and years ago when it was like, will you leave your children that you love, and you never thought you'd leave? Because it's always kids who leave. Parents don't leave their kids. It's the kids who leave. And they come along and they say, I've got to go because I feel the urge to go and to study, to travel, I met a boy, I met a girl, and they live in another place. But mums and dads don't go to their kids and say, bye. And I'm going because I'm going to meet people I've never met before, because they need to know who Jesus is. And I can tell you that, and it all sounds noble or stupid, one of the two. But there's grace there. Because you can never be what God calls you to be if he doesn't help you to be it. That's right. You can't do it. It's not a question of effort. It's not a question of squeezing your knuckles now and going, you just can't do it. God gives you an ability to do it. What happens in our church community? We had a way of reaching young adults who pretty much aren't in church today. We discovered a way. And that's going to come through people sacrificing their lives, their money, their time, and putting off things that they always wanted to do. When we were in Perth and we were wrestling with the early versions of this and wrestling with it, I remember we decided we would build a building similar to that, to what we have here. And I remember I did a I did a series of talks called Beyond the Boundaries, and at the end of the 6 weeks, we decided we would have a Saturday night and we would take up what we called a miracle offering. And it was all done anonymously. You never knew what was going to happen. Some of you here, you know what that was. And I remember on the night, and most of the people in the room were young adults. There was a few young married couples, but they were all young adults too. And I remember on the night, they gave $101,000 on the night. I remember going to one girl, and she had never owned a car, and she was 23 years of age and came from a family where her parents weren't able to help her. And I remember saying to her, she talked to me, and it came out in the conversation, this money she had saved for 6 years to buy a car, she put it all in so that we could do up the building, so that people would come to Christ. I remember meeting another young woman who worked in the Navy, and was quite a smart girl, and she always wanted to work in London, and she had been saving for years to move to London, and she made a decision not to go to London, but she put all the money she had in so we could do up the building. And she said, because I just want people to have what I've got. She's still walking today with her children, and her husband, they still love the Lord today. You know? And you can stop and you can look at those things and you can say, yeah, but that's all well and good for them. They didn't have anything. They were like the woman who sat outside the treasury who gave the few coins and said, I'm giving all that I can in order that people would have and know the Lord. And that's what we as a community, we need some people to stand up now. We need some people to stand up and say, I'm not going to build the house I was going to build. I'm going to lessen the house I'm going to build, and I'm going to give that money to the church. I'm not going to go on that trip. I'm going to give that money to the church. I'm not going to move away. I'm going to move to, in order that I can give more time. In order that people would come to a deeper love of Christ. It's going to take missionaries. And that all sounds noble now, and it will be noble always, but it's always comes through sacrifice and struggle and difficulty, and we're the work. What God's looking for is people here who'll be the person who'll open the door for others, the person who will choose to take the back seat so someone else can sit in the front seat, the person who will take out the garbage when it's someone else's job, who will volunteer to stack the chairs even though they're not on the roster that week, who will take the arm of an elderly person and help them be here, come what may, who will smile through the boring stuff that always has to be done in every family, who will talk to people even though they're shy, who will pay for someone else who gets stuck for money, because that's the kingdom. Yeah. That's the kingdom. And either we continue to be a ministry or we become a church family that loves the Lord so much that his presence drips, and that we become that place where we are passionate for our church community, that we become that place. Jesus said in Mark 9:35, he said, he sat down, called the 12, and he said to them, whoever wants to be the first must be the last and servant of all. Whoever wants to be first. I always wanted to be first. I was never first in school because I was never that smart enough. I was never first in athletics. I was always second because there was one guy who was quicker than me. But I always wanted to be first. If we are going to be people who serve this part of the country, this part of our world, it's going to take people who become servants, who put their names down on rosters and come what may, no matter what cost it takes to turn up Sunday after Sunday to serve when their name is down. I've shared this before, but this is so true of my family. We taught our family, my extended family, my brothers, our extended family, everybody, and all of their families. If you had an event on Sunday morning, under no circumstances would we come that we would put you before God. Because on Sundays we went to church and we would not put family before God. And I think it's one of the ways that brought our family that didn't go to church, how they gave their lives to the Lord in time, because we were faithful through thick and thin. The truth is, there's some of us here, all we've got to do is even have a fraction of a family function and we'll turn up and say, I'm not coming each week, because we put others before us. If you want to win your family to God, make church first. Make it first. Because in time, our family all went. No matter what's happening, they're not coming. There's a baptism. If you put it on when church is on, we're not coming, because we're part of a family, and that family, called our church family, needs us, and we're going to be there come what may. And so in time, if you knew us and all the people around us who did the same, all of our families, all of our extended friends, they all put the time, you can't come. We value you because you are the prayer power in our friendship groups. You're the prayer power in our families. And everybody used to change all of their things to fit around us, rather than we gave it up for them. And the point is, the only way to get there is to miss some stuff and to be painful. I read this recently, and it said, when a boy gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do a paper round to better himself, people say he's a go-getter. If some Christian organisation should ask that same boy to get up at 6 o'clock to do some work for the Lord, they would say, that's expecting too much of the boy. If a woman spends 8 hours away from her home working in a factory or office, she's called helpful and an energetic wife. If, however, she's willing to do the same thing to the Lord, they say religion has gone to her head. If one ties himself down to make payments of $100 a week for some time on items for personal enjoyment, he pays willingly. But if that same person decided to place that much in the collection plate each week, many people would say he's crazy. If someone goes to a party they are called friends, but if they go to church first, they're called fanatical and over the top. A crazy world we live in, isn't it? What will you be? Change your family, reach your family, love your family by making church first, by serving them by the witness of your life, and come to church. Many years ago, a Catholic priest used to ask me all the time how my personal prayer was going, and I didn't know how to answer. Well, he taught me how to pray, and my life has never been the same. It's the most important thing I do in my life. So I wrote a book called Personal Prayer for the Everyday Person that step by step helps us to pray. Have you ever noticed that so often our prayers can be just asking for things from God? And any relationship that's all about just asking for stuff is not really a very fulfilling and meaningful relationship, is it? Or have you ever noticed that so often when it comes to prayer, we just don't know what to say? Well, I'm a husband and a father of 5 children, and I wrote this book, Personal Prayer for the Everyday Person, for women and men like me who are busy and yet want to connect with God in some way. I would love to bless you and give you this book for no charge, for no cost. Prayer changed my life. I would not be here today if it was not for personal prayer. Write to me on this address or call me on this number and I'll send you personal prayer for the everyday person for no charge at all. And I pray it blesses you.
We want you to have Bruce's book, Personal Prayer, for free. Call us on the number on your screen or write to us at P.O. Box 97367, Washington, D.C. 20090 7367, and we'll send you a copy of Personal Prayer.
If you didn't get to church this week, or you just don't think you can go right now, and you'd know the reason for that, I want you to know this, is that servanthood, this whole idea of giving our life away in order that we find it, is absolutely true. Certainly it's been the story of my life that the more I've been able to give, the more I've found peace, power, and purpose in my life. Well, that's it. I pray you've been blessed. We'll see you next time. And remember, wherever you are around the world today, God is never far from you.
This program has been paid for by the friends and partners of Bruce Downs, the Catholic Guy.